It is wonderful to be here with all of you on this joyous occasion as we recognize and celebrate the accomplishments of these men and women who have completed their academic programs at Penn State. This afternoon, we are conducting commencement exercises for the College of Communications. To begin, it is now my pleasure to introduce today's commencement speaker. Don Bellisario, a Penn State distinguished alumnus, has crafted stories that have been a part of our lives for more than 30 years. Perhaps you've heard of these groundbreaking television series: Magnum PI, Quantum Leap, JAG, and NCIS. Born in Cokeburg, Pennsylvania, Mr. Bellisario served 4 years in the U.S. Marine Corps. He earned his journalism degree at Penn State in 1961 and began his writing career at the Center Daily Times in State College. He then became a copywriter for a small advertising agency in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. He later moved to Dallas to take a prestigious copywriting position at the famous Bloom Agency. After just 8 years at Bloom, Mr. Bellisario had risen to the level of Senior Vice President, Head of Film Production, Creative Director, and member of the Board of Directors. Still, at the age of 42, he was eager to gamble on a new career. Moving to Hollywood, he became a story editor on the 1976 to 1978 series Baa Baa Black Sheep with Robert Conrad. After just 5 episodes, he was promoted to producer. He then became supervising producer of Battlestar Galactica and subsequently began to develop his own series. Our soon-to-be graduates and many of their parents have grown up with Mr. Bellisario's great storytelling as part of their lives. With the exception of just 1 year, a television series created by Mr. Bellisario has aired on U.S. television every year since 1980. He has earned a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He earned that in 2004. In 2001, he was honored as a distinguished alumnus, the highest honor bestowed on a graduate of the university. In addition to honors from his alma mater and industry awards, Mr. Bellisario has been the recipient of numerous other awards, including the Marine Corps Scholarship Fund Globe and Anchor Award, the Red Cross Spirit Award, and an honorary doctorate of arts from Washington and Jefferson College. In 2006, Mr. Bellisario endowed a $1 million trustee matching scholarship in the College of Communications. He and his wife Vivian live in Montecito, California, and Sydney, Australia. We are truly honored to have an alumnus I greatly admire, Don Bellisario, with us today. Mr. Bellisario.
Thank you. Thank you, Dean Harden. Thank you. I gotta tell you, I got a bad back, so I gotta sit down. No, that's too low. Thank you, Dean Harden, President Barron, faculty, seniors, parents, friends. A few weekends ago at my home in Montecito, I entertained Penn State students enrolled in the college's Hollywood program. We talked about internships, chatted over dinner about how much nicer the weather is in California. And after answering many of their questions as I could, I said, I got a question for you. What would you like me to talk about? And 3 of the 12 said, we want a shout out. So to the Hollywood 12, where are you guys? With no help from them, I did what you'd do. I Googled commencement addresses. Many were good, a few were excellent, and a couple were bewildering. In 2011 at USC, Arnold Schwarzenegger said, "You can't climb the ladder of success with your hands in your pockets." I have no idea what that meant. The same year at the University of Pennsylvania, Denzel Washington said, "You'll never see a U-Haul behind a hearse." That was before the country western song. The funniest was Ellen DeGeneres, as you might expect. In 2009 at Tulane, Ellen said, "You don't know who you are yet. When I was your age, I was still dating men." So even if you do know who you are, you may not know where you're going other than out tonight. The postgraduate world can be scary with a job. If you don't have one, for your parents' sake, I hope you don't go back to your old bedroom like Dustin Hoffman in The Graduate or Aura in Tiny Furniture. The gravity pull of that bedroom is tough to escape. So if you don't have a job, find anything, something that's remotely associated with the skill sets that you've learned here. I'm not encouraging you to settle. It may not be the job you want, but it may be a step to the job that you want. Maybe it'll help if I tell you how I did it, just a brief story. Hard to believe, over 50 years ago, I was one of you. That is, if you're a former Marine with a pregnant wife and 2 small children under the age of 5. There was no College of Communications back in my day, just a school of journalism, where I majored in advertising. It was a curriculum dominated by print. There wasn't a single course on film. But there were good educators, even then. Like my mentor, Professor Roland Hicks, who's passed now. Dr. Hicks was a member of the greatest generation. He was decorated as a young Navy ensign who on D-Day had 2 landing craft blown out from under him and went back to get a 3rd. I can still see him sitting in his office in Carnegie with that wry Indiana smile, gleefully scratching through whatever I had written the night before. He no doubt made me a better writer. That June, I received 2 job offers. One as an assistant account executive at BBD&O in New York, and the other as an ad salesman for the Center Daily Times, right here, State College. Both paid $500 a month. That's about $3,000 today. I couldn't take my family to New York on that, so I went to the Center Daily Times to write and sell print ads to local merchants. It wasn't what I wanted to do, it was what I had to do. At night, I did what I wanted to do. I wrote short stories. I wrote a novel. I sent my CV to every ad agency that was listed in Advertising Age, seeking a job as a copywriter. What I hoped would only be a year at the Center Daily Times became 4 years. So finally, a small Lancaster, Pennsylvania agency decided to take a chance on me. They were doing TV ads for a dairy called Penn Dairy. 35 millimeter slide commercials, and if you don't know what that is, it's still photos. Like that show a photo of cows browsing in a field and say, "Our cows are contented." That show a photo of the dairy plant, stainless steel vats. Our vats are sanitized. That show bottles filling on an assembly line, a photo of a milk truck on a tree-lined street, and say, "Delivered to your door," and finally a logo. So I asked the account exec if I could make a film commercial instead of 35 millimeter slides. And he said, sure, if you can do it for $600, which is what the slides cost. So I went to WGAL TV in Lancaster, which is where the commercials aired, and I said, can you guys shoot this commercial for me on film for $600? And they said, yeah, and handed me a Bolex 16 millimeter camera with a crank and a roll of positive film. I got the director of print production at Foltz-Wessinger, who was a wannabe actor, to be the milkman. The dairy loaned me a uniform. I found a quaint cottage in the woods. And my 30-second commercial was quite simple. A milkman trudges through the woods, he climbs over trees, he walks through streams. He finally finds a cottage in the middle of the trees with a milk box at the front door. And he walks up and puts the full milk bottles in and takes the empties out. By the way, I didn't pay for the cottage either. They didn't even know I was shooting there. It was guerrilla film. So as he walked away, I pushed in on the logo, Pen Supreme. The Saturday morning we were to shoot, there was a thick fog. I had to wake the actor because he'd seen the fog and gone back to sleep. So I went out and we shot it in the fog. The fog lasted. I turned the fog over to the television station. They had it developed. It was positive film. They handed it back to me a week later. Reel to reel, I looked. It's pretty cool. I said, well, it needs to be edited. They gave me white gloves and led me to a 16 millimeter film splicer. I practiced on discarded film, made cuts, scratched the emulsion, applied the glue, pressed the heat, and when I was confident enough, I wound slowly through the film, careful not to make any scratches, and decided where to make my cuts. Remember, this is positive film. There's no room for error. When I was done, I added a music track. I didn't pay for that either. And I did the voiceover, which said something like, wherever you live, we'll find you. Pen Supreme. That was my first written by, directed by, edited by, produced by piece of film. The dairy liked it, the agency liked it, and a New York advertising competition gave it a third-place bronze. Now, why did I tell you this story? Because as good as you are, whether you have a job or not, you have to think outside the box. 3 years later, I joined a hot agency named Bloom in Dallas, Texas, as a copy group head. I spent 8 years working at Bloom and worked my way up to creative director and head of film production, traveling back and forth between production companies in New York and production companies shooting in Hollywood. Eventually, I started directing my own commercials. Now, I figure that I probably was up to speed to where you guys are today after your education here. And that's how fast education has changed, how fast this school has expanded in the courses and that it teaches. So I turned 40, and I didn't have a midlife crisis. I simply didn't want to shoot commercials anymore. So one of the shoots I was on, a grip had a screenplay. The screenplay was called They Shoot Horses, Don't They? And I said, can I read that? He said, yeah, take it. I'm done with it. So I took it, I read it, and that served as the matrix for every script I've written since. I was at a Dallas retrospective for the director, Raoul Walsh. A number of us skipped one of the screenings in favor of drinking beer. You don't know about that. Suddenly the door opened and in walks Jack Nicholson. Now he had just finished, he had done Easy Rider, he'd done Chinatown, so we crowded around him. And at some point, I told Jack of my screenwriting ambition, and he said, you can't do it here in Dallas, Texas, you gotta come to Hollywood. And from behind me, the voice of my wife, who I never heard until that point utter a profane word, said, "F you, Jack Nicholson." Except she didn't say F. I'm not moving my 4 children to that drug culture. A year later, divorced, I moved to Hollywood as a freelance commercial director. It was a tough year. Established directors were having a tough time. And now who's going to hire somebody who only directed his own commercials at an agency? So I did the same thing I did when I was frustrated at the Center Daily Times. I wrote at night. I wrote short stories again, but this time I concentrated on writing a screenplay. I'm going to cut to the chase so you guys can get your diplomas. In Hollywood, you can't get a gig till you get an agent, and you can't get an agent till you get a gig. It's the catch-22. I gave a copy of my screenplay to anybody that wanted to read it. A casting agent said, "Could I take this?" I said, "Sure, take one." I had about 10 of them. And she took it home to her husband, who was a B director at Universal Studios. He read it and gave it to his agent. His agent read it and called me in. He said, "You're a good writer. I'll represent you." I asked him, "How long before I sell a screenplay?" He said, "You'll sell a screenplay in a year and a half." I said, "I have enough money for 6 weeks." And he said those fateful words to me, "Have you ever thought of writing for television?" Thank you.